Welcome to the White Knuckle Podcast with your hosts, Jason Science and Dr. Clint McCoy.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast, episode number 150. 150 episodes in. It's hard to believe that many episodes have taken place in the last few years, but they have. Tonight, I have a guest co-host. That guest is Kevin Boulder from northern Wisconsin, and Kevin has been a team member of White Knuckle for the last couple of years. You've never heard from him. You may have heard of him or seen his picture in the post office. Kevin, how's it going?
Pretty good, Jason.
Good.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. And then we have the world famous Dan Infalt. Dan, how are you?
Doing good.
Good. First, Dan, let's talk real quick. Give us a recap of your storied season, Dan.
Oh, my season?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a long one. Yeah, I mean, I put in a lot of hours, a lot of days, and just kept pounding. I hunted Pennsylvania with the Public Land Challenge. On the last day, I almost got a giant. Then in Wisconsin, I ended up taking a 10-pointer during the rut. And after that, I traveled to Indiana and some other places. But ended up, the only thing I got was the 10-pointer. My gun season was a dud. And now I'm kicking back, pacing the floor, wondering if I should run back out of state or just hang her out.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough decision. There's a little bit of season left everywhere, really, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, yep.
When you went to Indiana, did you hunt public?
I hunted a little mixture of public and private.
Gotcha.
It was interesting. The private I hunted was wide open fields with just some tree lines.
Mm-hmm.
And the public, I hunted some swamp and I hunted some hills.
Okay.
I think the thing with running down there was I really wanted to get an experience of the area.
Sure.
Which is different than most people. I think most people just want to kill something. And
Right.
if I went down there and I really wanted to kill something, I did it wrong because by splitting up my hunts and going hunting river bottoms and then hunting the hills and then hunting a swamp, every time I'd just about get on something, I'd move someplace else. Where if I really focused on an area, I think I wouldn't have too much of a problem hunting something down.
Sure. You had to have been putting some miles on to have that kind of a diverse amount of terrain. I guess not really a ton, but some traveling. If you were in hills and swamp and timber, you'd have been in the southwestern part of the state, I'm guessing, somewhere.
Yeah, south central part of the state. It was all relatively close, and within 30 minutes from the flat river bottoms.
Mm-hmm.
I could see the hills I hunted.
Okay.
The Republic. So,
okay.
Matter of fact, hunting kind of the same deer, they drop out of the hills into the flat bottoms.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Would you go back?
Oh yeah. It was an enjoyable hunt. It's interesting. I learned a little bit about the area, about the people. I hunted an intriguing swamp I'd like to go back to. That seemed pretty cool. There's a lot of big sign there and not a lot of pressure. Seemed like there was a little bit of a puzzle there and I like that kind of hunt where you got to something's there and you got to figure it out.
Right. Kind of like Boscobel. I've just not been able to figure it out. Oh, that place made me nuts this year, but oh well, there's always next year. Well, Kevin, I know you've got a list of questions for Dan. Tell us.
Yeah.
I guess I'll let you kind of run it from here, Kevin. Dan, Kevin is like I told you before when we were talking. He's a student of the game. loves the game, works actually in the outdoor field. Right now he's a substitute teacher, and then you start your job again in the spring. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yep, we'll start up in early April, end of March.
Okay, and you work for the DNR or USDA?
USDA Wildlife Services.
Okay,
that's who I work for.
Okay,
so
cool. Well, I'll let you take it from here. I guess before we get too far into it, let's talk about the question on everybody's mind. When do your stands go for sale, Dan?
It's going to be really quick here. I don't want to give a date, but really soon.
Pay attention.
We just showed them, and we've got everything pretty much approved, and we're just wrapping some things up with the production people and stuff. And as soon as we have everything down, we're going to put them for sale, and that could be within a week or two.
Good. So sometime in 2021 for sure, if not before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. Now, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome.
Go crazy.
First of all, Dan, I just want to thank you for being here. I mean, myself, along with a lot of other people out there, have learned so much from you and your tactics and what you put out there. I just want to thank you for that right off the bat, and just for being here and talking. This has been something I've wanted to do for a long time, so I appreciate it.
I appreciate the kind words.
So really, Dan, what I got here is just a good list of not necessarily questions, but just good conversational pieces from being obsessed with your DVDs and tactics for a few years. I think they should spark some good conversation, and we'll just see where this takes us.
Sure.
So the first one I have on the list here, Dan, is I'd like to hear your thoughts on the importance of confidence and attitude, and just generally the mental side of beast style hunting and what that means to you. I think for me personally, after doing this now this will be going on my fourth season. I think where I've seen my most growth is in my mental side of it. Once I got my mobile system down for myself, I think, and you get those mechanics down, really where you start to grow is in that mental side of it, whether it's scouting or hunting. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on how important that is to you.
Well, you're spot on. I mean, I think that the mental side of it is the most important thing there is. And I think it's really underrated. A lot of people don't look at that as well as they should. I just released a video with Mario, and he had a hunt where he hunted the whole day, and at the end of the day, he just kind of gave up. In the last 5 minutes, he dropped his bow, dropped the string, and a giant buck comes walking out and rubs a tree underneath him at 10 yards. So, I mean, if he hadn't given up, if he would, you know what I mean? If he believed that something's going to come in that last 5 minutes, he'd kill it. And people don't realize how huge that is. I mean, I talk about hunting the fat girl stands all the time, the little tiny trees that are next to the road that, you wouldn't want anybody to see you in. Those spots, you got to have the confidence to hunt there, because if you don't believe it, you're thinking you're doing something stupid. You'll never sit there. You have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to be all in. And in order to do that, the hard part about that is most of that takes killing some deer to get that confidence, which makes getting there hard. But you can get some of that confidence from good scouting, looking at the area, really figuring it out and saying, what, he's got to be here. And then you get more belief in what you're doing, but confidence and attitude is everything. It sure is. Think about it like if you've hunted with various people, hunt with just a fun loving guy who's just having a blast. It's easy to hunt with the guy. His sloppiness or just having fun can kind of throw you off track of your own goals. But if you hunt with a serious guy, that's great too. And that's probably the best scenario. But the worst scenario is you get stuck with somebody who has just got a negative attitude. and I think we've all been there, the guy that complains about everything. If he misses a shot, nobody wants to be in camp with him because he's mad and angry and tossing things around and stuff. Those attitudes rub off on other people. And if you have that kind of attitude, good luck ever getting anywhere in hunting. You have to be able to laugh when a buck outsmarts does you, and you have to be able to have a buck getting close and leave without getting angry and actually being happy about it because you were close. A lot closer than if nothing came in, right? Attitude's everything.
Right. And I think, too, that kind of speaks to a podcast you did a long time ago where you were talking about learning from your mistakes and how you thought that one of the biggest mistakes with people who are just getting into these tactics and learning it is that they don't take the time to look at what happened and learn from it. And instead of, getting caught up on possibly missing an opportunity or a buck getting your wind and being upset about it, learning from it and improving, the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole why factor. An average hunter goes out and sees a deer and says, wow, I saw a nice buck. A great hunter goes out and sees that buck and says, well, why was he there? What was the wind doing? Where could he have embedded? Why is he coming through here? Where's he heading? Is there food over there? Is there does over there? What's going on here? And how can I move into another position to kill this thing? Where I hear from your average hunters about how they sit the stand 3 times in a row and the buck comes through just out of range every time. And you're thinking in your head, why didn't you move? But, it's huge the way you think about things, the way you go about them. And, but the guys who ask why all the time are the guys who earn their success, who put themselves into a better position. We're always thinking about their next move,
Exactly. And I think, too, that this just leads into another good topic that I think should be talked about a little bit more because, in my experience with growing in this style of hunting and trying to target bigger animals, it took me a while, really, to realize the difference between a 4, 5, 6-year-old animal and everybody else. And there really is a huge, huge difference there. The more you do it, the more you see it. And I just think that, maybe Dan, I'd like to hear, your thoughts on really the importance of separating that target animal from everything else and not getting distracted. Because I have a lot of people that I talk to, a lot of friends, a lot of buddies that get into this and they start popping around mobile, seeing deer, getting some success, and that success of seeing those younger animals and those lesser deer, I think holds a lot of people up. And I can definitely speak from personal experience with that as well. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on really, if your goal is to kill a big mature animal and how you really need to separate those from everybody else and really focus on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. For me, I see a lot of guys who really want to shoot big bucks, but they can't stop hunting little deer, and they can't understand what they're doing wrong. And basically, it's 2 different animals. A mature buck is like a whole different animal from a young buck. Once they hit certain age classes, they just become a whole different animal from the herd and move different, travel different, really avoid people different, and you have to hunt that animal. So a lot of times when we're hunting mature bucks, we're not hunting on heavy trails. We're not hunting in spots that glow. We're hunting in spots where we think you should be. And for your average guy to do that, I think they got to see deer. They think they're getting closer if they see 5 or 10 deer a day. But those deer, it's like seeing squirrels. They're not seeing the target animals. So they might see, because they're targeting food sources or they're targeting heavy trails and stuff, they might see 50 deer in a season and maybe 1 shooter. Where I only see 20 deer in a season, but 8 of them are shooters. That's the difference. And you have to be able to go 5 or 10 days straight without seeing a buck in some places, in some areas. Now, some places that's not true. I mean, there's some places you go, you could sit anywhere in a door, a small buck's going to come by you. But the fact is, you have to be willing to go to places where you're going to see a lot less deer, because it's going to up your odds to shoot a mature one. Because they just don't move and travel like the smaller ones for a big portion of the year.
Right. And I think I can, obviously anybody who's started to dive into this will quickly find out that that's going to be the case. And I just think you have to be okay with that, and know that you're going to be doing the right things. If you're focusing on these areas that you always talk about, and trying to get away from people, and trying to think outside the box, it's okay to not see deer for a few hunts in a row. And I think, the more that a guy does it, it's easier to kind of get over that, instead of dwelling on, well, I haven't seen a deer in a week. Well, really, you're just one step closer in the big picture.
Right.
You guys bring up a topic that you're sort of touching on a topic that Dan and I have talked about many, many times, and that's loving, not so much the success, but loving the failure along with the success. Probably in most cases, loving the failure more. And I believe that's just a great reflection on our lives. I mean, if you don't learn from your failures, you're probably not going to be a success. And the struggle for me is, at what point have I failed enough that I believe in myself enough to stick it out, like Mario did. Just didn't make it the last hour, I guess. But it's a great point, and it's a tough game to play.
Yeah, it is.
I think one thing that in respect to this can cover both hunting and scouting and just looking at areas, but I think the whole overlooked spot phenomena is one that probably holds up a lot of people. And I can say that for a while, when I listened to you talk about finding big deer in overlooked spots, and the best stuff is overlooked, that a lot of times for me it was confusing to really, what is overlooked? And it's hard to visualize it and see it, but when it really clicked for me is when I finally found a huge buck in one of these spots. And I mean, one of those spots where I probably could have thrown a baseball from my truck at the parking lot and hit him in his bed. It was just one of those properties where once you saw how it laid out and why he was there, it made so much sense. And I think, sometimes it takes somebody to actually see a buck in one of these spots, or find, the sign there for it to actually click as to why. But I was just wondering, Dan, if you could give maybe some insights to maybe help people, find some of these overlooked spots that you always talk about. And I think to kind of go along with that, eliminating ground off of a property is probably one of the biggest things with that as well. You're always talking about how we can cross off like 90% of a map, and eliminating that ground first, I think, and then looking at what's left is really important, where I think a lot of guys maybe do the opposite.
Yeah. I think going along with that, crossing out 90% of the property, because all the big bucks are in the 10% where people don't go, comes the whole mindset of, I always, in the back of my mind, I got this idea that mature bucks know where people go, and they're hiding in there for their lives. So when we're going in there to kill them deer, put yourself in the other shoes. Put yourself in that buck's shoes. Say you're a smart buck and you're living there, and all these people are coming into this woods to kill you. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? How are you going to hide? How are you going to set yourself up to see them coming, to smell them coming, and if I put myself in that deer's shoes, I think about, I would sit right up here by the parking lot where nobody goes. I'd sit over here on the side. Nobody's going to walk into the public, come all the way back around and loop back over to the road over here where there's no parking, and hunt right next to the road. I'm going to check over there. Now, those spots still need to have the type of terrain that'll hold a deer. There really doesn't have to be a lot of terrain. I mean, you could hold a big buck in a quarter acre of good habitat, as long as there's not pressure there and he has a good escape. And that's huge too, is that they have some way of escaping. if they got to run through open fields and stuff, no mature buck's going to put himself in a situation like that. Well, he will eventually or occasionally. But most of the great spots you find that are overlooked are going to have those features. Nobody goes there. And if you went there, you'd feel like an idiot hunting there. Because that's why nobody goes there. Because they think, well, why would I hunt right next to a parking lot? Or some people think I'm a joke. But you got to think about, where doesn't anybody walk? And that changes too. I mean, some places it's different than others, because some places, like, they release pheasants and people beat all this brush and stuff that's near the roads and near the parking lots. Well, then you ain't going to kill no big buck there, right? But some spots are real good next to the parking lots. I mean, a large percentage of my biggest bucks were killed right alongside the road, because those are usually the areas where people don't go. So, I mean, I got a knack for looking at those things. I mean, I've got buddies that hunt with me that'll be like, well, how did you even think to look there? When they go to help you get a buck out, And to me, it's obvious, because I have that mindset. I'm thinking, I do not want to hunt someplace where everybody else hunts. I mean, most of these public lands in the areas I hunt, you can't get deeper than everybody else. Everybody gets deep. Everybody gets, along the way, people are hunting every place there's a rub. I just went out hunting with one of my buddies, Tim, yesterday. And I took him to an area, and we got in there, and it's public land, and it's a bowl-only area. And we get in there, there's these huge rubs as big around as my hip, and they're 100 yards from the parking lot. So the first thing I did is my head spins around, where's the tree stand? And there's a ground blind sitting right there. Because everybody hunts that. And if you just keep hunting big rubs, big scrapes, and thick cover, you're hunting like everybody else does, and you're going to have the same results. You have to think outside that box. You have to get the mentality that a mature buck cannot live to be 6 or 7 years old on a property that constantly has hunting pressure with people trying to kill him, unless he finds places in there where people don't go. He can't walk through that woods. Where you're seeing those rubs and stuff, he's not doing that in daylight, or he'd be dead. So you got to get that to your mindset, and then you got to think about, well, where is nobody going, and go there. And you have to believe in it and try it. And a lot of times you're gonna think, well, this is a goofy spot, and you're gonna go in there, and it is, and nothing happens, and it don't work out. But if 1 out of 10 does, you're doing a hell of a lot better than 1 out of 50 in the middle of the woods where everybody else hunts.
Dan, a quick question from you, not to segue away from this at all, but a quick question. I think it's relevant to this topic. Is, do you think that style, that thought process changes at all from private to public?
I don't. I think it changes slightly, depending on the private.
Okay.
But I've even on managed lands, and even lands that have very little pressure, the pressure still does the same thing. If guys still have that mindset of going to the middle and stuff, like like there might be a lease that has 4 guys on it, and they've been hunting there for 4 years, so it's pretty much the deer are used to them. They're going to have a way of hunting and going through there, and there's going to be stuff that they don't look at. And I've always had a knack for going on a property with somebody. I'm invited, and the first thing I'll be doing is saying, hey, I don't want to interfere with any of your hunts. Where are you guys hunting? And most of the time I already know. By looking at a map, you can say, well, this is where your typical hunters are going to be. And generally, I'm finding that these hunters will go into private property from the same axis all the time. And at least half of the time, I'll find a big buck that's holding up watching that axis. Like he'll bed in a spot to watch to see if those hunters are on the property, or to smell them. And if you think about it, it goes right back into the same thought process. That deer's thinking about, how, these people are coming here to kill me. What do I got to do to survive? And it's the same thing you'd be doing. You'd be setting up so you know if somebody's on the property. If they always come on the same way, set up to watch them. You got to remember, a deer ain't like a person. People have this perception that if a deer sees you or something, it knows where you're at. But really, a deer can come through after you're gone and knows everywhere you've been. It can smell your footprints. So it's a little different than a person. So they're really kind of patterning you and tracking you. And if guys always come onto the property from the same way, the same axis, they split up to the same stands, they rotate through stands, those deer get to know that. And now you take these properties like you've got 80 acres or something, the guy's got 10 stands on there and he rotates through them. You know, they'll kill bucks out of those stands year after year. They'll get their 2 or 3 year old bucks that are decent bucks. But if you go back and you look and you ask any of these people about the biggest bucks they've got, then ask them where they shot them. I bet you more than half of them were, the biggest ones, were not out of one of those stands. It was when they did something different. They first put up a stand. They first tried a spot. They moved one day because they saw a deer. And, you know, I'm no different. I mean, on the little farm that I hunt and the farms I've hunted in the past, we've got set stands in the perfect positions. And you can kill 2 or 3 year old bucks in there all the time. But when a deer gets to be 5 or 6 years old, it never ceases to amaze me when you get on its track in the snow, how he can go through that whole farm and never go within range of one of those trees. They have you patterned. They don't get to live there 5 or 6 years without knowing where every one of those traps is. And Dan, it's really a matter of thinking outside the box, thinking where would he be if he knows where these guys are hunting them.
Well, you know, it's you've mentioned it before, Dan, you know, when we were talking about youth season or young kids shooting big bucks, it's oftentimes, especially during the Wisconsin gun deer season, they get stuck in probably not what, you know, most people, the committee would call the best spot.
Yeah.
And they end up, you know, shooting a deer. And you know, I just really quickly, this year, I learned a valuable lesson, and that is to think outside the box. As many times as we've had this conversation, one of the guys that I'm in on the lease with was hunting this buck, and he'd been hunting it for 2 years, but he's only on his 3rd year of hunting, but he just got ate up with this one deer, big drop tine, big deer, yada yada yada, and we kept getting pictures of the deer at night in this cornfield that we had a stand in. And it was now rifle season, and he would visit it, you know, every night. You know, he would be there on 1, 2 in the morning, and that's when we got a picture of him. And every night, that's where he would sit, because he was hoping that one of those nights would be the night that it was going to be cold enough, that it was going to be the right conditions enough, that he was going to check those deer in that field. And he did that for 7 days in a row. And it was the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I had a migraine headache. It was horrible. It was a really bad headache. And I buried my phone out in my living room under 2 pillows. But you have a knack for hearing things when you're already irritated. And I could hear it ringing. And I'm like, who in the hell is calling me at 6:45 in the morning? You know, just constantly. And finally I went out, and it was Chad. And he's like, I killed wires. And I'm like, you what? I didn't even know you were going to hunt. And he's like, oh, I didn't say anything to anybody. And I'm like, okay, where in the world did you kill him? He's like, in the cornfield. And I'm like, what? What? I said, that's gutsy. We told him, don't try to go in there in the morning. You're going to blow the whole field out. What he did is he went in there an hour and a half early. Took a nap. It was a box blind, and he took a nap in the box blind or whatever he did for an hour and a half. And as it got light, he had to wait over 35 minutes to kill that deer. But that deer was out there, not anywhere close to a trail camera, but it was still out there, and he shot it and killed it. And it was just him thinking outside the box, you know, and trying something different.
Right.
So, you know, and again, it's just an example of someone who isn't, you know, a seasoned hunter, like I guess I'd like to think I am, and certainly you guys are. I wouldn't have had the guts to do that because I'd have been afraid to blow out the field. But he was careful, he went in and he killed the deer. The deer scored like 182. It's huge.
I think too, just to piggyback on what you're saying, Jason. I mean, I run into a lot of people in my neck of the woods that set up their hunting system exactly to what you were just saying, Dan. They have, and I did this too. Before I stumbled on the beast and everything, but you have your set stands, whether it's over bait or in funnels or whatever, and they stay there and they don't move them. They rotate through them. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people show me trail cam pictures of real dandy bucks, especially for northern Wisconsin. And rarely do those bucks get killed if they're over 4 years old. I really think that most of those deer, if they get to 4 years old on a lot of the properties that I know how people hunt, they will not get shot by a hunter unless they go on somebody else's property and make a mistake chasing a doe or something. They're not going to get killed out of those stands. They just won't, right? Because they're too smart.
One of the worst things those guys do is they set up a sanctuary. They make a section of the property that they don't go into. And they make it so that deer learns that if he stays in there until dark, he's fine. And there's nothing wrong with staying out of an area most of the time, but there comes a time when you move in for a kill. And I think the trick is to learn that bedding in the off season and learn how to move in there and kill them without really screwing up the area. But a lot of guys that don't understand how bedding works and stuff will just section off an area and say, if we don't hunt in there, this buck will stay on the property and eventually he'll come out. And, they might have a chance in rut, maybe once or twice he comes running out. But really, those mature bucks don't run around chasing does like the 3-year-olds. And there might be 2 or 3 days he comes out and gives you an opportunity in the whole year if you do it like that. And then he's running around chasing does. He might not come straight by you. But if you get into, the off season, like late season or early season, a lot of times they're on a pattern, and just a slight move and getting in there and taking your shot will do it. And you think about it, they're so worried about going in there. They go in there during shed antler season, look for sheds. They get in there. And during hunting season, if you walk in there once and blow that deer out, say worst case scenario, you step on them and blow them out of there. What damage did you really do? At least you took a shot at it. And it's no different than when a coyote walks in there and bumps it out of his bed. He's going to booger him for a day or two. He's going to move over a little bit, but he's still going to be there. As long as you're not repetitively going in there over and over and over again. There's nothing wrong with taking chances.
Yeah, and just to again touch on what you just said, with the patterns and stuff. One thing that I was able to capitalize on this year with the buck that I shot was finding a pattern late season and jumping on it instantly. And I think just the way that hunt transpired. I've heard you say a lot that one of the best times to kill a mature buck is late season, and for me personally, it's tough for me late season because it's hard to find the right property that the deer are on. In a lot of cases, it's tough for me to find the food, in proximity to the bedding where I can have access to it. A lot of times I'm kind of out of the game late season, but this particular hunt, this property I had permission on last year as well. It's a small property, and it actually reminds me a lot of Dave's farm. It's very open, and there's not a lot to it. And this year, it had the corn, and there really wasn't much there early season. Hunted it, I think, mid-October one time, and opening weekend a couple times because I'd heard that there was a big one around, but never really saw anything. And slid in there for one hunt last weekend, the muzzleloader. Got eyes on 2 real good bucks. One was in the 140s, and then the other one was 160s. Seen him Saturday morning. And I was actually going to go, and I know you've had this before too, Dan, where you know they're going to come through someplace, and you hang back anyways, and they go through right where you thought they were going to. But this particular one, it was a tough one with scent and stuff. There was like no wind at all, and there wasn't really much of a thermal rise because it was cloudy. So I just didn't want to take a chance. But seen him go through, and raced back and grabbed the muzzleloader when I saw how big the buck was. And the very next morning, made the move. And by the time they came, I hunted that night and they didn't come through. But I think what they were doing was kind of going out a different way out of the bedding area in the evening and kind of circling back through that direction in the morning.
Sure.
And he came right back through with all the other deer and right at first light, got him. And that deer was, when I shot him, he was standing less than 80 yards off the road. In just one of those typical spots that I don't think anybody's ever hunted that on that property. And that's where all the sign was. That's where they were all going through. And it was just a classic, jump on it while it's there and while it's hot. I don't think that deer was there earlier in the season because the sign really wasn't there. But when I went in there and scouted afterwards, he was definitely there during the rut. But it's just, I've heard you say a lot too, how in the early season compared to late season, that can not be the case in a lot of cases where, you get one down, you think you got it nailed and you go in and they come out a little funny or whatever. But would you say that maybe late season, they kind of lock into a pattern or a little bit more vulnerable, maybe even than early season?
Yeah, absolutely. Late season, a lot of times, and there's a lot of people still hunting out there that are probably going to listen to this, but late season, they really get locked on a pattern from food to bed. I mean, they're stressing a little bit, especially the older bucks. I mean, from the breeding and stuff, they're really run down. And they get on a food to bed pattern, and they got to conserve energy in the cold. So they try to bed close to the food. The trouble is, like you said, they can it can be feast or famine. So all the properties you have access to might be a ghost town, and the property you don't have access to might have all the deer. It's not like they're spread out like in early season. And that makes problems too, because you can have 100 eyes on you, and I've gotten perfect setups where I've had giant bucks walk past me in late season, and you start to draw the bow and one off 20 yards to your left blows and screws the whole thing up on you. You ain't got no leaf cover. It is a hard hunt, but it's easy to pattern them. But there's nothing easy about hunting late season.
Right.
The best time to do it is when it starts to get bitter cold. As soon as it starts to get like 20 degrees or less, they really move in daylight well and stay in that pattern real well. The best thing a guy can do is sit back and watch them for a night or two, see what they're doing, really observe how they walk through the area, if there's any deer that are going to bust you coming through, and then the next day moving for the kill. And not only that, but I mean, say you see a nice buck come through, and then just before dark, a real monster comes through. Like you said, you saw 140 and 160. Well, who wouldn't rather shoot the 160?
Right.
But if you rush right in there and you sit there and all these deer come out through a pattern the same every day, and you shoot the 140 before the 160 gets to you, it's because you didn't know. Always best to sit back and know. Like you said to me a second ago, it's not always that way in early season. Sometimes you watch a deer do the same thing 2 days in a row, and you move in, and the next day he comes out 100 yards over. It's not the same. Late season, they really, really lock into them patterns.
Yeah, and I think too, maybe it might have a little bit of something to do with it. The food sources are a little bit more limited at that time of the year as well. Where early season, there's still so much food out there.
Absolutely, but it's not just the food. The food's limited and the bedding's limited, and the cover to travel is limited. Everything's limited,
Yeah.
And then if you get any kind of snow cover, depth of snow, it's really exhausting on a deer that's stressed from the rut and stuff, and ain't getting enough food to begin with to push through snow. So they're going to go as little of a distance as possible.
Right, and I think too that's a big factor as well in those late season deer that I kind of overlooked. It's been a while since I've shot a buck at this time, and that deer, I mean, for sure, a 5-year-old deer, and I'll bet you he wasn't 150 pounds dressed. I mean, he was very run down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know we're kind of encroaching on some of the time here, so there's a few more things I'd love to get your thoughts on. One here, we'll switch gears a little bit. So, I think in the things I've learned from these tactics, one of the biggest things that I'm continually right now wanting to improve on in scouting, in season and out of season, is really interpreting sign, understanding what it's telling you, and understanding what you're looking at. And I'd like to get your thoughts on how important that is. I think that's something that I am really just starting to grasp a lot better now. And the best example that I can give you for what I'm talking about is a hunt you did with Mario in the Conservancy quite a few years ago. You were using a particular island for access to hunt a spot further back in the swamp. And all of a sudden, overnight, the sign blows up. And immediately, you knew that buck was there in daylight because that sign was in such close proximity to a known doe bedding area. And you knew that the reason that buck was coming through there was to check on those does in that bedding area. But you also knew that he'd be there in daylight because that's when the does would be there. So I think that's really, really important. And, in that case, led, for you guys to hunt that. But I think we all can probably improve on, really looking at that sign and trying to get as much information as we can.
Yeah, I mean, that's really true. You can have, like in a case like you were just talking about, that buck might be dropping rubs, hundreds of yards from there too. But those are being done at night. And you got to be able to read where that sign is being left in daylight, like you said. And usually it has to do with bedding. And if you don't even know all the bedding, you can base it on terrain. I mean, a lot of times I go into a new area and I assume something is daylight activity because it's in close proximity to bedding. And that might be the buck itself's bedding, or it might be doe bedding. And sometimes you're going to be wrong. You just throw a hunt at it and nothing happens. You move on to the next spot, But the longer you do it, the more you get right about reading those things.
Right. No, and I think, a big one that a lot of people starting out with these tactics are going to hear a lot is, when you're seeing sign, try to relate it back to, what the bedding that you know of either is or where you think it's at, and just try to relate it in proximity. But that specific one I thought was really important just because of its proximity to not just buck bedding, but doe bedding. And I remember in that example that you guys had laid it out that there was a nice rut bed adjacent to the island, and that's why that buck was there. So, but I just think, interpreting sign is a big one. And I'm always continually trying to get better at that.
One thing that really helps with that is that if you look at a property, most guys, when they go into the scout, they kind of scout aimlessly. They wander around just scouting. Where I'm walking the transition lines that are going to be on the edge of bedding and stuff. Then when I find sign coming out of the thick, coming into the open, I can kind of assume that the buck's probably bedding in that thick, right? But the guy's wandering around aimlessly all over the place, and he's finding, a cluster of huge rubs and, in a pasture or something. He's like, oh, I got to hunt here. Well, why? What's putting you there? The rubs? I mean, because the deer is, 95% of the time they're up and moving around is at dark. And you can't shoot them. So 5% of that sign is laid down during daylight when you can shoot them. So you have to be on those transition lines that you assume are close to bedding. So if you're walking along a transition of oak woods to like swampy lower land grass and brush, and you look out into that grass and brush and you just see a tangle of an island out there, and there's a heavy trail coming from that island and there's rubs on it. It's pretty easy to assume that that's more likely daylight activity than the rubs you find in the middle of the forest next to an oak tree, right?
Right. No, I think that's just really important and something that everybody can always get better at and try to improve at. And I think too, one thing with me personally going into these tactics, and I think it's kind of helped me is, when I got into it, I kind of not got away from trail cameras, but almost didn't have the time just because, I'm trying to scout a lot of different spots and learn a lot of different things. And I think that helped me just with reading sign a little bit more, is to not have a camera to even think about it, just going off of what you see. That's another thing that I wanted to ask you about, Dan, too. For guys that are just starting in this, I think there's a fine line between overwhelming yourself with too much and also not getting outside your comfort zone enough. And I think, when I first started, I probably did a little bit too much to where it was almost like information overload. And I think, I started throughout the first half of that season trying to narrow my focus onto a few areas and just try to learn them. So, for guys that are, because I know this beast style of hunting and everything is growing very, very rapidly. So for guys that are maybe just starting to get into this, what would you say for that question? What's too much and what's not getting outside your comfort zone? I know it kind of depends on the individual, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you make a good point. I've had it where I started running some trail cameras and stuff. I think that's too much for me. I mean, because I got to run around and see day to day what's changing. I mean, if I quit hunting for a week, the difference is staggering on what the deer are doing. I mean, it's almost you got to keep an ongoing thing of keeping track of what's going on and how the deer are shifting to different foods and stuff, and how the patterns are shifting to keep up with them. But on the other hand, trail cameras can be helpful. The big thing is that guys don't get addicted to them. Some guys get so addicted to getting pictures that they're really too busy running cameras to really hunt. And you have to be scouting and you have to be actively searching out the buck that you're going after in order to kill them. And you certainly, if you start taking cameras and start putting them where you want to kill your deer, that's a huge mistake for most people. Because when they go and put that camera in there, that deer already knows he's being hunted. You go in there to hunt. You go in there to kill. I might throw a cell cam in a spot and leave it for a long time where I think in a few weeks a certain deer I'm after is going to probably start betting in this one area.
Hey, Jason, Chuck,
and I'll just let it sit there and I'll wait for that deer to show up while I'm off hunting other stuff. And then it doesn't really affect me that much. But if I start trying to go run around and check cameras and stuff and still find time to scout and hunt, you end up chasing cameras. You start saying, oh, well, look at these pictures. Last week, 2 days, this buck was at this camera. Then you go run hunt there, and you're not hunting, the other spot and blah, blah, blah. But really good scouting and finding spots where you haven't been before in this season is way better than going to a camera and hunting there. Now, if you're getting intel, it's a whole different story. Like I might drop a couple cameras around Dave's farm, and it's just for inventory. Just on food plots, see what's there. When it shows up in the camera, okay, now I know there's a deer here. Now, the hunter in me, I know how to scout and how to find out and figure out where he's bedding. The camera doesn't do that for me. It just tells me what's there and what's available to hunt. It tells me I'm not wasting my time when there's nothing living there. So I think people get too dependent on the camera as a tool to kill big bucks rather than just to tell you a moment in time. As a matter of fact, a real good use of cameras is to put them in an area and let them soak for a long time and use the intel you get from it for the next year at what dates deer are going through there and such. I can think of one spot on Dave's farm where we had this little bedding area that's in the corner, and it had produced some deer, and we decided to put this little kill plot right next to it. They're only going in and hunting like once or twice a year. And we did that. And we had seen big bucks come in and out of there every year. And we hunted it a few years, and then I put a trail camera there, a cell cam. And I thought, when a deer is in there, we'll know because of the cell cam. We'll just leave it sit there. And I was shocked to find out that after running that, not just that first year, but a couple of years running cameras in there, that no deer were there early season, which is when I thought they were. There was deer there, but there were does and fawns. And then around, October 10th or to 15th, something big would always move in there every year. And we wouldn't have known that without the cameras. But from running the camera the whole year, seeing what's going on there, multiple years, that told us that. And with that knowledge, this year, Dave slipped in there right around that time frame. And the cameras had told us in the past that's when bucks show. He shot the biggest buck we've ever shot on that farm there.
Yeah, that was an awesome hunt. That was really cool to watch that. I could tell from the videos that you were definitely more excited for Dave than even when you shot yours. That was really awesome.
Yeah, that was really an awesome hunt. It was awesome to see him accomplish that.
Yeah, no, that was really special. And Dan, this is another really good one here that ties on to what we were just talking about. So I know that, the way you typically do things is before season, you probably got, say, 10, 12 different even animals that you're thinking about going after. But my question to you is, and I try to do the same thing. I try to get as many bucks, on my radar as I can. But in a lot of cases, I have to travel a pretty good ways to get on them, at least the size of animals that I'm trying to go after. So, and I know, again, this is going to depend on each individual, but when do you decide, you're going after a buck, it's a little drive from your house, you're on them, but it's not coming together. When do you pull the pin? And I think the best example I can give for this one is like the bear bait buck. You had pictures of him, he was a monster, but it was a good ways from your house. You want to go after him, but then again, you don't want to take time away from some other nice bucks that you could be going after. How do you balance that?
Well, it's really kind of hard to answer. The balance is the belief in whether or not you can kill them, right? Goes back to that confidence thing, right? And really, I'm kicking myself with that bear bait buck, thinking I didn't have the confidence right to kill that buck. That if I would have went in there with a better attitude, I think that deer would be dead, or dead by me. I believe a gun hunter got it. I heard about a gun hunter getting a huge 200-incher up there, and there aren't very many huge 200-inchers in that forest. So, and the buck disappeared right after that. But that buck, if I would have went in there with the right attitude, I think I could have went up there and took a week or two off of work and hunted him down and killed him. And I tried doing it on weekends and just didn't get it done. But the times I hunted up there, I did have opportunities. I did see him. I did get on his sign. I figured out where he was bedding. But you're right. It's a travel trip. One of the other things is, like by my house now, this used to be a really good area. And now it's getting a lot of attention. It's getting a lot of attention from beast-type hunters. All the parking lots around here are starting to fill up with non-resident plates. And when I get out of a car in a parking lot, everybody says, "It's Dan." So I got to travel a little more to get onto bucks. All the spots I used to hunt, the islands and stuff, all got guys on them. You go out there, just cell cams all over the place, and it's just hard. It's a harder hunt. Now I got to move around a little bit more in order to get on good stuff.
Dan, would you rather hunt public than private, or doesn't it matter to you?
You know what? It makes a little bit of difference. I kind of more in my pride, which I guess really shouldn't matter too much, but the pride of killing something on equal ground with everybody else, I kind of enjoy that. But it doesn't matter that much. I still just like hunting deer, and I like different scenarios and different ways of hunting. So I'll go hunt private land, public land, whatever. I've gone from hunting huge managed farms where 150s are walking past you every day to hunting a public property the next week where you're hoping you get 120 inch. And I set my goals accordingly based on what I'm hunting or where I'm hunting. Mm-hmm. Instead of like some people that set their goal at like, I'm not shooting anything unless it's 160, when, half the time you're hunting where one doesn't even exist that size. So I kind of make it realistic, but.
Right, exactly. They'd be better off playing golf.
Right. But there is something cool about going into a public marsh and there's 15 cars in the parking lot and you walk past everybody and kill the buck. That's kind of a cool hunt. But in the same light, anytime I'm out hunting big bucks and I'm in the game and I'm playing a game with a buck, it really doesn't matter if there's a land border or not. I mean, some of the public land I hunt is, especially the stuff I travel to, is better than some of the private stuff I've hunted. It's all relative.
And one thing, Dan, just to add on to that as well, I mean, one thing I really admire about you is as long as you've been doing it and as many big bucks as you have under your belt, you still find a way to keep hunting fresh. And, you've been doing it longer than I've been alive, and you're still having fun and doing it and learning new things, maybe at a much slower pace now as compared to when you were my age per se in your early 20s. But, it's very inspiring to me to watch somebody like you, go through season to season and constantly, have fresh things to go on, new situations. It's inspiring in the fact that I don't see this getting old for me anytime soon.
Cool.
So,
Well, that's
with that, I mean, there's Jason. I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add there. Or, I got a couple more things, but we're kind of getting down to it here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess one more thing, Dan, that I looked on here that I didn't mention yet, that goes into a little bit of a different topic is picking the tree. I know you did a video on this some time back, but I can definitely see where over the years I've made a lot of mistakes in picking the trees that I've sat in. It's definitely cost me some bucks, but I'm improving as well. But I think what I've tried to get it down to is when I'm picking my tree, and you can kind of just give your thoughts, but I think there's three main things that everybody is really looking for when they're picking a tree mobile. And that's, the cover that you have in the tree. You're thinking about the general wind direction of the day and thermal drop in the evening. And I would just like to hear your thoughts on, number one, how important it is picking the tree and how you take your time, and your thoughts on cover, wind direction, and thermals, and what you think might be the most important.
Yeah, that's a hard situation to explain. When I go in to pick a tree, and I got an area in mind, or I'm coming up on an area, and I think, well, this is where I got to hunt, I do not walk over there. I try to stand back from a distance and look at it. And I look at the wind direction, not exactly, I'm going in there. I already know what the weather says the wind is. That doesn't mean that's exactly what it's going to be, especially in the exact spot where you're at.
Right.
So at that point, I'm checking the actual wind. I'm thinking about how it's going to change throughout the evening. I'm thinking about how the thermals are going to kick in. I'm looking at openings in the trees to see if they're going to create swirls or something. I don't want to get on the edge of an opening that's going to pull my wind in a circle back around to the deer. And I want to try to find a spot where if there's a thermal drop, it's going to drop away from the deer. So then I usually pick a spot, an area of about, 15 feet square about where you got to be. And then I'm looking at the trees and trying to find a spot with, with cover and a good spot to set up where I don't have to cut branches or anything. I can just slide in there. And sometimes I got to get a little closer, and that changes. Get a little closer, and you're like, well, that ain't going to work because of this. Because now that I moved a little bit, the angle's wrong. This is wrong. There's a branch in your way or whatever. And I'm slowly making my way in there until I pick my tree. And when I get in there, I'm thinking about my approach. I'm looking in front of me at a path to get to that tree. So I'm not stepping on it that's going to make noise. I'm, going around obstacles. I'm not walking where deer are going to walk. I actually take quite a bit of time picking the tree in the spot I'm going to be in. And I've noticed that when I hunt with other people, that they don't do that. They wander in there, they look around, and they just start setting up. And afterwards, they'll tell you, I probably should have been in that tree over there. I probably should have did this. And a big part of that is that when you're a mobile hunter, it takes you a few years to really get that down. But hopefully with telling somebody that this is what you got to do, you really got to think about how thermals affect it. You got to think about how an opening in the trees affects it. You got to think about what's going to happen if you get too close to the edge and your thermal's going to pull to the water, and that's where the deer are going to come from. You got to think about those things, and I guess getting burned a few times is what opens your eyes. I think some people never get it. I mean, some people don't ask the why, like we talked about earlier. So they get up there and they just go, "Oh man, deer got a sixth sense. That wind was in my face all afternoon. And when it got calm out, the deer walks out and smells me. Notices me or whatever." Because they don't even put two and two together and think about why it happened. That why is important, and it's important when you start looking at your setups too. But setups are critical, and everybody looks at that as like that's not the big deal. They want to know where's the deer bed and how close to you be to them. Where you set that stand up, how you set it up, how you're camouflaged in that tree, and how your wind current's going to go at the edge of darkness when the deer walks out is probably the most important aspect of your hunt.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I see the exact same thing that you touched on there as well. You know, when I'm with other people, it seems like everybody's very quick to set up, and I definitely was that way too. You know, because you're in there, you got your skin on your back, you want to get up a tree, but I think the more times that I sit back and really think about my placement, and I know that you've related it to this as well, and it is. I mean, it is a chess game. 100%, and you have to place your move where you think, all right, this is it now, and I think the more times that I sit back and really take my time, the better off I am. But I just wanted to stress the importance of that, because I don't think a lot of people are doing that, and it's so huge, and it's, like I said, it's definitely cost me bucks with that happening. And that kind of goes into another question I got for you, Dan. I know you did a video on that last year, dropping thermals in flat land. You had a buck come out of the swamp, got into some thick buckthorn. The thermal sucked down there. He caught it and runs off. Now, let's say, for instance, that was some huge buck that you were after. He was there. He came up. He got your thermals. What's your next move after that?
My next move is to move to kill him when he comes out in the same pattern. And when he doesn't show up, then go find him. Now, the reason I say that is sometimes those zeros just stay in that pattern. The next day he'll come back out. He'll forget about you. They are just a stupid animal. I think odds are a mature buck is not going to come right back out the next day in the same spot. He's gonna probably come out a different way or relocate. But you got to give it one shot just to see, because I've seen them come do the same thing after they've been busted. But once it doesn't work, then I don't take that as a bad thing. I don't get angry. I don't get mad or pissy. I smile and say, okay, you won today. Now I know you're here. It's game on. It's game on for him. He knows I'm there, but I also know he's there now, right? So now I'm just going to hunt that area down. I'm going to hunt every little spot that he could be hunting or he could be hiding until I get him.
No, I think that's really important, that you're automatically going to the conclusion, okay, you're here now. It's not, it's over. And I think a lot of guys get to that point, and I've definitely been there, where it's the buck I'm after, and it comes out and catches you, and it's like, oh my gosh. Well, the buck that I hunted last year a lot, didn't end up getting him. Real big buck. He was bedding right alongside the parking lot. That happened with him one night. And that deer, for the next probably 3 weeks, didn't move more than a half a mile. I mean, he stuck right in his little area that he had, that he knew the game and he knew how to survive. And especially sometimes with those older deer, that can just be something that you can use to, okay, he's here, where's the next spot I can kill him? And looking at it that way instead of getting upset about it. But it is easy to do.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, other than that, I think we've covered a lot of stuff here. I just wanted to, wrap this up with, again, saying, Dan, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you coming and talking. This has been something that I've wanted to do for a long time, since I've gotten into your tactics. I mean, my hunting and and everything has completely changed for the better. I've had more success now than I ever have, and I'm going in the right direction. I have you to thank for that. And
Appreciate
I'd also like to say that I'm super excited about the stand coming out. And for anybody that's thinking about it, or the sticks, I've used stand sticks, the original, the ones from their very first run of them, and I've been using them for 2 seasons now, and I have not had to do a single thing, and they've been absolutely awesome in every situation for me. So again, Dan, thank you very much, and Jason, thank you for having me on, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Sounds
good.
It was the easiest thing I've done all day, buddy. Dan, thanks for thanks for taking the time again. Thanks for being part of our 150th episode. It was definitely interesting to sit back and try to keep my mouth shut and try to apply a lot of the things that you said to a lot of the mistakes that I made in a very unsuccessful season here with a bow. But there's still a little bit of time left.
Yeah. How long are you hunting over there? Till the end of the regular season?
Yeah.
Or do you got January?
No January. When does the regular season close? Like the 8th or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's some pretty good hunting in a lot of parts of the state till January 31st.
Right. So I leave for Missouri on the 26th for a muzzleloader hunt that I was actually down there filming last year for. And I get back on like the 1st or 2nd. I don't know which day. And then I'll, depending upon how real estate is, it's been a tough year to get anything to string together here in terms of being down in the southwest part of the state, because the majority of the stuff that I deal with is up here, Marquette, Adams, Juneau, Wood, those counties. So I haven't been able to spend as much time down there as I wanted to. And, one of the things that you guys talked about tonight was having confidence. And that is one thing I guess I'm not necessarily happy about, but to an extent I'm happy about, is I recognize when I got back from Missouri, I only hunted Missouri 2 days, and was back in Wisconsin, and I just had no confidence in southwest Wisconsin, so I just came back to the lease I had here, and took a few days away and saw a bunch of deer, and then headed back, and ultimately just never got close. But I plan on being down there, hopefully maybe even Christmas Day this year, and the morning of the 26th, and then head to Missouri late in the afternoon on the 26th.
It'd be great to kill a Christmas buck.
It would. I don't have anything. My son's home from the Marines. We're going to get together. Well, he's here with me all week anyway, but we're going to get together on the 24th, so that leaves the 25th open, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of pressure out there, so it's supposed to be cold.
I've killed a lot of Thanksgivings. I've never ruined a Christmas.
I had a Thanksgiving deer this year.
I'm on the verge of trying not to ruin anything right now. I got a couple that are still hanging around I want to go after. Still got a bow tag, so I'm trying to tread lightly, but I still want to go back out there because that 140s that was with the other big ones still in there. So,
well, good luck the rest of the way, guys.
Too,
go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah. No, one thing too, Dan, I just wanted to mention as well. I was able to get over to western Wisconsin this year for the first time in hunt hill country, and after spending probably the last mostly 3 years really trying to learn swamps and stuff, getting over there was a big step outside my comfort zone, and it was a lot of fun. Hunted a variety of properties and spent a lot of time in the hills, looked at a few swamps, but almost killed a Midland 30s 8-pointer over there, and had another nice 2-year-old on the last day. It was a lot of fun and a big learning experience for me. And I can't wait to get back down there this winter and spring and do some scouting, and then hit it even harder over there next year. I can see why you went up there a lot for rut and stuff years ago, and it's still.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most underrated hunting areas in the country. I mean, it's great hunting, and really not a lot of people head over there. And the guys from northern Wisconsin up where you're at, I mean, you got it so hard with the wolves and crap. You come down there, and it's got to be like a cakewalk.
Oh yeah, it's that, and I mean, it's like going to a whole other state. From where
yeah, it's a whole different terrain. That's what I love about Wisconsin. It's so different and diverse. I mean, you can hunt the suburban areas. You can hunt the cattail marshes of southeastern Wisconsin. You can hunt the farmland of central Wisconsin. You can hunt the hills of western Wisconsin. You can get into the big woods of the northern Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a great place for a guy that wants diverse hunting.
Right. And my dad owns a painting company, and he actually has a 6x10 enclosed trailer that I might be getting off of him, and that's going to get turned into a mobile hunting rig per se. So just for me and my schedule and everything, it'll be awesome to be able to take 2-3 days and not have to worry about lodging and just travel and hunt some of those areas. Because it's tough being in in areas where you got to travel a long ways to try to get on a decent buck. I mean, I'd rather just travel and be able to just go right there and spend more time in areas that have more big deer.
Right.
So.
All right. Anything else, guys?
No, that's all I got. Thanks again, both you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you. Hope everybody else out there listening has a Merry Christmas. This will air in the next couple days here. And Dan's stand will be on sale sometime in the near future. In the meantime, you've got a bunch of new wearables, right, Dan?
Wearables?
Yeah. Like, don't you?
Merchandise?
Merchandise, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we do.
I thought...
Didn't Venado have some new Beast t-shirts up?
Oh, we might. Mario's been handling most of that while I've been running around the woods harassing animals.
I know I saw something the other day. You posted it, or at least whoever posts your stuff does, from Venado.
From Venado. Yeah, Venado's been selling the stuff. I thought you meant Hunt Beast Gear was selling it.
Oh,
no, Venado sells our the Hunt Beast hats and jackets and hoodies and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So to clarify, it's Venado is where you can go to find that stuff. I guess with that, we'll wrap it up, and I'll say thanks to both of you for taking the time. And again, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Merry Christmas.
You bet, guys. Have a good rest
Merry
of your
Christmas.
night.
Thanks, guys.